It's my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Well, it's another big day for Brexit votes today, with various amendments being proposed and voted on the next steps to take, on how to deal with the various problems dogging the process, and so on. These debates should be starting around 1 PM and finishing around 7 PM for voting. There's a wide variety of amendments which are being proposed from across the House, virtually all parties represented, all incorporating or trying to deal with the problems around the same sort of things. It's unclear at this time exactly what will be voted on, by who, what will actually even be presented for voting on, because that's down to the Speaker, but it's likely to be a representative sample of the various amendments and bills that are being proposed. These all cover similar sorts of ground, so rather than going into each amendment in turn, I'll cover the various aspects of the amendments. The one that is potentially likely to pass, if it's presented, is ruling out a no-deal Brexit. So there would be a vote to try and tie the government's hands so that if we get to the 29th of March without any sort of final deal, we'd have to withdraw Article 50, remain part of the EU at least for the time being, and that's how that would move forward. This has, or appeared to have, enough popularity in the House of Commons to pass, and it's about the only one with which there's any certainty on that sort of thing. If Brexit is us about to lower our wedding tackle into a grinding machine, ruling out no deal would be pulling out at the last second. However, in this political game of chicken that the government is involved in, or rather Theresa May is involved in, this would signal to our opponent that we're unwilling to go the whole way and actually grind off our own genitals in order to make a point. Obviously this weakens our position, but it does prevent us severing our own genitals. Next, there's various options to extend the negotiation period, so to basically go back to the EU and say, look, we don't think we can resolve this in the time that we've got left, could we maybe have a bit more time? Depending which amendment is being proposed on this could be 6 months, it could be indefinite, it could be 10 weeks, 12 weeks, it really depends, and all of this is subject to change depending on how it's potentially voted on. In any case, so this is like saying, hang on a minute, we're not quite sure we want to grind off our own genitals, taking a few steps back or rewinding the conveyor belt a bit, just for a while to come up with some other options that maybe don't involve severing your own tackle. Another option is to force a push, a change, a shift in the government's negotiating stance. Some of this comes from Labour, so is rather unlikely to pass, and involves shifting the negotiation stance to allow for a more permanent customs union, or perhaps participation of some kind in the single market, perhaps without full participation. This hasn't really been on the negotiating table up until now, and is likely to be what some call a Brexit in name only, without us having any real say in what's going on, but binding us closer to the EU. It would be less harmful than a full Brexit, but wouldn't provide any of the things that Brexiteers wanted, so this is really rather unlikely to pass. The customs union part might, but that's still going to require going back to Europe and negotiating some more. So essentially this is asking for less before you threaten to grind your genitals off in a meat grinder. A people's vote is very popular in the populace, very popular in the party membership of the opposition parties, but probably doesn't have enough oomph to pass in Parliament at the moment, as things stand. If anything, May's deal is becoming more likely as the hardline Brexiteers put party before country, either way you cut it, and fall in line. This is still the option that I believe is the best way out. You've threatened to grind off your genitals, but if the people who convinced you to grind off your genitals change their minds, you can get off the conveyor belt without losing too much face, and certainly without losing your genitals. Another version of this option is a people's assembly. This isn't something that there's really much of a history of in this country, though it has been popular in Ireland, and this is extremely unlikely to pass. This is where you take a representative sample of the people of the UK, consulted to and with by experts, discussing the issues, coming to some sort of decision, and then the government or parliament being bound to discuss what they come up with. This seems fantastically unlikely, though I would like to see something like this become a more regular part of our politics. This is deferring the decision to someone else whether you should grind your genitals off or not. A Norway-style deal is on the table. This is similar to Labour's ideas of renegotiating on customs union, single market membership, and so on. It just has the cachet of already being something that exists, so potentially easier to negotiate, but in reality, probably not. And then Hilary Benn has presented a bill, an amendment, that would allow a series of indicative votes. This is really just kicking the can down a couple more weeks and saying that the government, or parliament at least, will discuss various options to provide indication to the government on how to negotiate. This strikes me as a complete waste of time. The sticking points, as ever, are the backstop and no support for May's deal. Now, May's deal may have slightly more support, but it needs a hell of a lot of more support in order to pass. The backstop, well, that just ties us indefinitely to the European Union to deal with the Northern Ireland problem. That's like feeding your John Thomas and one bollock into the grinder, but holding off on descending the other testicle into the metal jaws for a while. And the problem that many people have with this is that they'd rather, rip off all of their genitals at once rather than waiting. The basic problem we have here is that the two main parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour opposition, are still playing party politics with this issue rather than coming together or putting country first and making the hard, unpalatable decisions. The Tory party split, the Labour party split, both leaders are playing to their party rather than seeking any sort of solution. Surprisingly, there is a near-perfect solution which doesn't appear on any of the ballots today. It's a sensible compromise, and it gives us a way clear out of this mess with nobody's genitals getting grinded. We could have a deal with the EU in which the EU is not sovereign over the UK and Parliament is sovereign, where we make our own laws. We could have a deal where, instead of the EU making judgments on UK human rights law, we would set up a separate human rights court which enshrines British notions of human rights, and the rest of the EU would have to abide with that. There is a solution where the EU would allow the UK to propose legislation and regulations, so we would make the rules rather than just take them. We could have opt-outs from key EU laws and regulations that we don't like. That is possible under this deal. We could refuse to pay any sort of divorce bill, and instead we could only pay the existing requirements that we have for funding and pension commitments that involve the EU. We would that way save all the money that we're currently spending on Brexit. We could have a veto over an EU army, which the British don't seem to be particularly keen on for some reason. We could replace the Council of Ministers with an elected body. We could insist that commissioners could only be nominated by national governments and not the EU. We could overcome all of the issues with exporting to the rest of the world and trade deals and so on, and we could get the backing of the EU for trade deals, giving us a much stronger hand. We wouldn't have to be part of the Schengen area, we could have passport controls, and we could exclude people from entering the UK that we didn't like. We could have full control over our immigration, and we could record when people entered or left, and we could require them to have work within 3 months of getting here or have to leave, and we could require them to have private medical insurance. So, we could stop what people think of as freedom of movement. We could remove the whole need for a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We could get rid of the ban on public investment that's supposed to be there, which would allow us to improve our infrastructure, nationalise industry and invest in public services without a problem. We could build new housing for hard-pressed working people and armed forces veterans. We wouldn't have to rename anything like Bombay Mix. What we could do is just reject this whole stupid idea and stick with the plan that we have, membership that we have. That's what I've just described. And that's not all. Every piddling little detail. There is no deal better than the one we have. Zang.
The police bring in reinforcements.
There was justice there, no poverty, and no violent crime. The children never cried.
What is the point of Jeremy Corbyn? What is his purpose? Nobody knows. They call him the leader of the opposition. So when is he going?